Well, I caught my breath here a little bit. Um, when I was in Rhode Island, and I reference back to this for a moment here, um, Rhode Island, where I grew up, where my great grandmother moved the family to, was a unique place probably in the United States. Every corner had a different church on it, or a bar. Really unique. On one side of the street's the bar, the other side of the street could be a church. And there were all kinds of different denominations. There were so many denominations, in fact, that I attended a French Catholic school, and there was an Irish Catholic school, a German Catholic school, a Polish Catholic school, a separate French Catholic school, and everybody was segregated. I mean segregated. The competition was incredibly fierce between the schools academically. Well, Rhode Island, being the Hope State, was the place that Roger Williams left the state of Massachusetts for and came into Rhode Island so he could practice religious freedom. And that's why, even though it was the smallest of states, it was the most important one to our spiritual nation. So I guess in a sense, Father truly honors the prayers of us, his children, those of us who become born from above, receive the gift of Holy Spirit. Now, I can't judge that, how it happens with the Catholics or the Catholic Church. I believe every denomination has believers in their churches. When I went to Rhode Island, I did not make what they call the confirmation for the Catholic Church. I was the only one out of all the schools when they had a huge confirmation, how can I call it, service. They drilled it into us for months. We had all kinds of things to memorize, all kinds of duties. And when the time came around, I knew I had not fulfilled all the duties that were required to be confirmed. And so therefore, I chose not to go. And what I later found out is I was the only one who did not attend, and I was the only one who did not get confirmed in the Catholic Church. Well, that's pretty amazing, because it wasn't intended for me to be confirmed in that church. Father had a plan for me. He put me through these different scenarios. Number one, my family was not a praying family. Number two, they were not spiritual people. My parents were a product of coming out of the Great Depression, being born during the Great Depression, and having lived through it, and hardship upon hardship upon hardship their whole lives. Before I was born, my mother lost 4 children, and the doctors told her, do not have any more children. They won't survive. Each child was born prematurely and badly deformed. Well, I was born, and I was, like any other normal birth, normal child. But I had a sister come after me who ended up being a midget, and Sherry was badly deformed besides being a midget. She had all kinds of issues. So I can see sometimes where out of great adversity, Father works in people's lives. And I certainly saw that, even though my parents weren't spiritual people at all. My mother, she was Protestant. My father was Catholic. And my aunts hated my mother because she wasn't French, number one. Number two, of course, she wasn't Catholic. But that made, no sense whatsoever, because my aunt, one of them, practiced witchcraft. Oh my God, it's unbelievable. Well, as time went on, the this is, my father knew he had to move us out of Rhode Island. Winters were severe. His back was broken. He had lung issues. It was not good trying to raise a family. So that's why the decision to move to California. So, all of that was a little bit of backdrop to what ended up happening to me. The night there was a party with the next door neighbors. Back to my story, living with my cousins, they had a party one night, and all these people came over, and we're all next door in the home, and I'm the kid there. I'm 17 years old, and the witch comes. I just call her a witch, and you'll learn why. She always looked off to me. I look at her, and I just knew something was wrong, but again, I had no reference to go ahead and even understand these spiritual matters, or why I could see spirits, or spirits would show up in my life, or why I was there in my cousin's life, and why we went through this scenario at the time I arrived with these entities called aliens, greys. Well, this witch, she had quite a history of her life with these aliens. They started with her when she was leaving Russia. And this is a woman who would get possessed, and she could write documents with both her right and left hand at the exact same time. She could just basically write stuff out. She asked me to go into the trunk of her car and bring out this suitcase, and the thing must have weighed 50 pounds. And I brought it in the house, and she opened it up, and it was filled with writings, page after page after page of drawings and writings and all kinds of stuff. And along with her was another witch, a very young witch, beautiful looking girl. And what I later found out is they were trying to go ahead and seduce me so that I would join them. And this younger witch, along with the older witch, they started expressing stories about this federation of entities in space. And because they had seen the picture that my cousin drew of the two heads, this was the topic of conversation amongst the four of us, my cousin, myself, and the two witches. I didn't like what I was hearing, but it was fascinating in one sense. But something transpired where the one witch, the older witch, was standing in front of my cousin, who was standing in front of me facing her. And this elder witch physically started to change. And she looked like the most hideous type of witch you would see out of something like a Walt Disney cartoon. And I could see it, and I couldn't believe what I was watching. And my cousin turned around, and her face was just filled with terror. And she looked at me and she said, "Bruce, make her stop." Well, I took my cousin's hand and we left. And she said, "You saw it?" I said, "Oh, I saw it." And to this day, I'm really thankful she saw it and turned around and asked me, and I saw it, so that it wasn't, just, you never know. You think you're seeing something, it's so unbelievable. You don't understand what this is. Well, I pray nobody ever goes through these scenarios. But I believe it was part of what Heavenly Father was showing me where the world truly was at. Mind you, I'm 17 years old. Soon I turned 18 when all of this transpired. My father finally came back, and my family, they ended up moving away. We never really associated with those cousins again. Their life was messed up, believe me, unbelievably. And I didn't seem to have too many issues. And as time went on, I moved up to Northern California, to the San Francisco Bay Area. I moved with a buddy. He said we could find some work up there. And sure enough, I found work. They employed me. They wouldn't employ him. But I had injured myself pretty severely, but I was determined to make life work. I was all alone. I wasn't with my family. My family ended up, I think, moving back east, and then they moved back to California. They were nomads. They didn't have a stable life. And I'm an 18-year-old kid living on my own totally. And I ended up moving in with a Hell's Angel. And he ended up being the manager of the plant I worked in. And I was, the leader of all the workers. And I'm a kid, and all these are men. But it worked out. I did what I had to do, and a few years later, by the time I'm 21, all of a sudden, these entities that I encountered at 17 years old with my cousin, these aliens that people call them aliens, they showed up, and they wouldn't let me sleep. They literally, 20, 30 minutes into my sleep, would come to me. Oh my God. And I didn't have any way of combating any of this. I didn't even know what it was. So I went ahead and I would get up in my truck. I built a truck from the ground up, and I would drive around the San Francisco Bay Area. And in the morning, I'd go back home. I'd cook breakfast for my father, and we'd go to work because he ended up moving out there with my mom, and we started a chimney business. So I went ahead and was pretty disturbed. It was a very disturbing 6 months. And then one day I got the thought to go see an ex-girlfriend's sister. I don't know why, but Father knew that was the solution. So I went to see her, and I spent a while sharing my story with her. And this girl listened very quietly. She knew everything I said. Must have been real. She didn't say anything. She said, "Excuse me, I'll be right back." Went in the house and got a Bible, opened up the Bible, and started reading it to me. And I thought, my God, that's the first time in my life someone ever actually took a Bible and read it to me. Wow, I was 21 years old. Well, she taught me enough of the Word to attend her church, and I learned the truth about Yeshua as best as they could teach me. And I learned that, in order to be saved, one must, that understand that Yeshua was crucified, and that Father raised him from the dead. And, you believe that because you hear the Word, and you hear enough of the Word to where you get confident enough to where you believe it. So, I confessed with my mouth the Lord Yeshua, and I believed in my heart that Yehovah raised him from the dead. And as the word promises in Romans 10, 9 and 10, thou shalt be saved. Well, the moment that happened, no more devil spirits, no more alien characters, none of that. It stopped like you turned the light on. Oh, hallelujah. You want to talk about being excited and thrilled. Oh, I just was really, really happy. As time went on, I worked as a handyman and quit my job in the factory. I started becoming a handyman, working for myself. I built a ladder, a wood ladder. I basically, I built the whole thing. I had a half of a ladder, a base, and I decided I could build my own ladder, and I did. Now, that's a remarkable thing if you kind of understand anything about carpentry. I never had any super formal training. I just knew how to do things, so I did. My buddy saw me build the ladder in his driveway, and he said, any man who can build a ladder like you have can do anything. He asked me to go in business with him. I'm a kid, and he's 10 years older than me. And he says, no. He said, let's go in business. So we did. Him and I went into business. We became general contractors. We fought like cats and dogs. I was nothing but integrity. He was nothing but, he tried to sell snow to a snowman. He was a big old guy. He was 6'2", weighed about 320 pounds. Here I am, 5'11". I probably weighed 175 pounds. And I never backed down, and he never backed down, and it worked out because, we knew how to get a job done. We ended up becoming disaster recovery contractors for Underwriters Adjusting Company and the Small Business Administration. Where everybody else failed, we were the contractor of last resort. And we did some incredible work. I'm just astounded to this day that some of the things we did. As a matter of fact, I have built a giant retaining wall, 175 feet long, 24 feet high, 7 foot deep into the ground on the Hayward earthquake fault. Unbelievable story. But I was a kid. I was dedicated. I knew how to get a job done. I committed to doing a job. We did it. And we did quite well, but I was very unhappy. See, there were a lot of questions in my mind that weren't being answered. And I prayed to the Father one day, and here's where things changed. I had been studying a Dr. Eugene Scott. He was a brilliant man. He was a biblical teacher. He owned his own satellite. So he broadcast to us, to the King's House believers. He called us King's House. 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. And I spent, I'm going to say conservatively, 50 hours a week watching him besides doing my construction business. I did two things. I did construction and I studied. And I listened and I let this man teach and put stuff together. Problem is, it wasn't coordinated properly. It wasn't organized. It was he had a Gestalt method of teaching. He would just throw everything out at you and then see where the pieces would fall together. The problem with that is, you're bouncing off the walls, I call it, too much. So I was rather frustrated. Let me stop here.